phone went flat that time, so I'm not going to join the videos together. This will be part 1, part 2, part 3. All right, this is about the secret world of philosophers, and I've given a few examples already, and I was halfway through one, and then the phone went flat. All right, so what's the next one? I was just about to mention Sister Margaret Mead. I've forgotten her name. Of droughts and flooding rains. Whatever her name is, the poet. I mentioned her in the previous thing. Judith Lucy. You know the poem. But she was a 1920s person. She was in the 1920s, and she was an Australian poet. And the secret world of philosophers is what this is all about. And it's this business where in the public domain you can be judged on what you say, but you can't be judged on what you think. And I think, I've put forward a hypothesis that pretty much everybody doubts, not openly but secretly. And I think everybody's a philosopher. You know, when I claim to be a philosopher, you know, and I have a secret world of my own philosophy. And philosopher, you know, to be a philosopher, you don't have to be good at it. You don't have to be wise. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to be clever. You don't have to be right. You just have to like the game of sophistry. Philosophy, liking wisdom. You know, to be a philosopher, you just have to like philosophy. You don't have to be good at it. And I think just about everyone in the world belongs to a club. Almost everybody in the world. And I think everybody in the world who can think is an evil philosopher. That's what I've been getting at in the last 2 episodes. All right, and this is part 3. So what was my next example? Dorothy, whatever her name is, it's not coming to me now. I probably got her name wrong in the previous episode. She's the one that wrote that poem, I love a sunburnt country, you know. And what I mean by that is Australia, because we've got droughts and flooding rains, you know, and to live here is quite a pain. That's how that poem went. But she had another poem, and this is where everyone's evil. And it's called the Negros Leap. Now, it's not called the Negros Leap. It's called the Niggr apostrophe S. No, Niggers apostrophe leap. The Niggers Leap. All right. And that's the name of the poem. Now, it's a protest poem. She is protesting against, at that point in time in history, against the fact that Indigenous Australians were massacred. So she wrote this poem about, and this was her being outraged, if you like, protesting against violence against Indigenous Australians. And she called it the Negros Leap. Now, someone could make a proposition. She was racist herself by even naming her poem the Negros Leap. Niggers Leap. Now, here's a proposition. It is racist for anyone who says the word Niggr, all right? And even if it's no excuse to be in a different time period. It just means that you didn't think it through properly, even in your own time period, and all that sort of thing. All right. So it was wrong even back then. You know, you should have been in front of the rest of the world in this thinking, or you should have talked to Indigenous people and see if they've got any objections to that word. And you know, this is an enlightened woman in her time, just like John Lennon was enlightened in his time when he wrote, "Woman is the Negro of the world." All right, woman is a nigger of the world. I can actually say that because it's just go onto Spotify. It hasn't been banned. There's, you know, if there was a big problem with it, why isn't anyone protesting and getting it off Spotify? Woman is a nigger of the world, and he chants it, you know, for about 4 minutes straight. He just chants that. The point of what he's saying is do something about it. But the point is, someone could put the proposition forward right now that he was being a racist anyway, by even using the word in the title, because yes, we know he was trying to make a feminist point, but you don't have to make a feminist point. You don't have to make a racist point. You know, someone could claim that right now. I could say, yeah, but he was an anti-racist as well. No, he wasn't. It's just another white man trying to talk about, just desperate to talk about racism, you know, and all that sort of stuff, and using the word Nigger for shock value, which is what he was doing. Even he said that I was using it for shock value because I was so keen on getting the feminist point. But I'm also anti-racist, you know, and all that sort of stuff. I described that in the previous episode. Right, now, so think about this. Dorothea McKellar, is that her name? These things slowly come to me. Now, the N-words leap, the Negros Leap. Now, that's even wrong intellectually, because Indigenous Australians aren't Niggers, even if you're a racist, you know, because they're Indigenous Australians. You know, they're not Negroes. Negroes come from, you know, Negros. I'll say Negros because that's, you know, less inflammatory. They come from Africa, you know, and all that sort of stuff. You go on and on. You know, but the word black has made a comeback. Actually, the word Negro has made a comeback because quite a while ago, black was a bad word, but now you're kind of forced to say it. You know, I just got educated in not saying the word black. You know, not calling people black. People were all the same. Why would you draw attention to people's colour and all that sort of stuff? And now Black Lives Matter, and I have to identify people by their skin colour for the purposes of being an activist for Black Lives Matter. You know, I've got to say you're black and I'm not. You know what I mean? I've got to acknowledge that and all that sort of stuff, recognise it and all that sort of thing, and so on and so forth. So everything's changed again. You know, we had this whole coloured period, and it was actually a good thing to say coloured people. You know, the coloured people of the world. Terms, they change. I'm used to this because I work in disabilities, and we used to work in an institution for people with disabilities, and they were the residents, you know, because they used to be, you know, in a previous time, you know, the spastics and all that sort of stuff, you know, which were actually scientific terms and all that sort of thing, morons and all that sort of stuff, all scientific terms, no negative connotations and all that sort of stuff, but they developed negative connotations, these words, so then we started to call people residents of the institution, you know, but then it didn't take long before all the kids in the playground in our town were saying, you're a resi, you know, you're a resident. And the word resident started to have negative connotations, like the word moron had developed. An idiot. Well, idiot. I think that was just an outsider in Greek. The word idiot, it just means an outsider in Greek, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Every teen girl in Australia practically wants to be an outsider. All right, you know, like Harley Quinn. All right. So, you know, and then, so we switched and we started calling them, well, they're clients of our services, you know, they're not residents anymore, they're clients of our services, you know. Soon enough in the playground, you're clients, you know, and then someone had a great idea in the public service, let's call them residents. And, you know, this was someone who hadn't been in that period before where residents had become a bad word. And right now, people with intellectual disabilities in places where I work at the moment are called customers, you know, of a service. So language, you know. So, you know, because I'm old, I've been through every phase, and I've got to say, yeah, and I'm talking to people, you know, 25 years younger than me. Anyway, with our customer group and, you know, all the customers in the group homes that we service and all that sort of stuff, but in my head I'm saying, yeah, it won't be long before the kids in the playground say, customer, you're a customer, hello customer, you know, Jack's a customer, you're a customer. You know, we'll come up with a new word for people with intellectual disabilities, and it might be the word moron. Because, you know, maybe, no, that one's definitely been made negative. Residents. Why not residents? They're residents of their own home. Same thing with the N-word, you know. It's got negative connotations, you know. But the word wog, it's got positive connotations where I am in the world, in Melbourne. You know, being married to Greeks and all that sort of stuff, it's got positive connotations, you know. It's complicated. Anyway, back to the N-word. Okay, so this Australian poet in the 1920s was objecting to the massacres, a whole lot of it, it's one of the massacres, and white settlers drove a mob of indigenous people. Maybe, I don't forget what they did. Maybe they, so-called stole a sheep, and drove them off a cliff, and in some sort of grim sarcasm, this Australian poet, and I'm not quite sure of her name, I'm sure it's McCullough, Judith something, she wanted to write a poem. Poets use all sorts of devices, and the device she used is to call it the Negros Leap. And you can Google that now. It's it's an accepted poem, and it's not called the N-word's leap. Why? Are we still trying to get to that point where we censor the title of that, or is it important that it's still called that? You can debate that. But the point is, someone could say to you right now, that word Nigger is never acceptable. And the fact that it still exists as the title of a famous John Lennon song on Spotify, widely available everywhere, is a very bad thing. Someone could say that to you. And they could also say, and that poem by that Australian poet also should be censored because of the title of that poem, even though both these people were activists for the right things, If someone said that to you and you started to argue back, at that point in time, you are doing a wrong thing. So what you do is you do it internally. And you say, was John Lennon, in the context of him using that word so blatantly and obviously and for shock value, was he doing the wrong thing? As you have that internal dialogue, or dare I say, an actual dialogue with another person in secret with the door closed so that nobody can record you and then get you sacked from your job, if you have that dialectic debate, whatever you want to call it, is that a wrong thing to be doing? Having that internal monologue dialogue, whatever you want to call it, or that actual dialogue with one other person, or even a secret philosophers club where you get to discuss all these bad things and not automatically accept them on face value. Is that a bad thing? And to the extent that it doesn't matter whether it's a bad thing or a good thing, it's going to happen anyway because people are going to do it, including you, I'm sure, whoever you are. When, I could be a famous rapper and someone could say to me that same-sex marriage is a good thing, and I might be a rabid anti-racist when I say no. Same-sex marriage is a bad thing and homosexuals should be stoned. There's plenty of rappers, and especially rappers more than rock and rollers, believe it or not. I could explain that, another thing, but, LGBT is very acceptable in rock and roll, but very not accepted, with exceptions, of course, in the rap and hip-hop world, right? And yet they're white hot on the idea of anti-racism, and yet quite negative about LGBTQI+, and a hell of a lot of rappers and hip-hop people and all that sort of stuff. You don't see so many people out of the closet in the rap world as you do in the rock and roll world. Yes, of course you see some. We're not on social media here. There are exceptions to rules. The exceptions don't make the rules. All right. So where was I up to? I can't remember. I was talking... Well, this is not about any of those issues. This episode and the previous one to that. This is about philosophy itself. And whether the act of philosophy is... if you are a philosopher, are you a bad person? And I think you are. And I think everyone's a philosopher, so you're trapped. St. Paul said that. He said, put away your philosophy and just accept what I'm saying. And I think to the extent that St. Paul was, an evangelist of his time, secular saints these days, because he's a saint, St. Paul, in his time, but he's a bad person in these times, but to the extent that he was a saint in his time, the secular saint today would say that if someone tells you that to use the N-word openly, in public, in debate, is wrong, and John Lennon was wrong to use it in the title of his song "Woman Is the N-Word of the World," and whatever her name is, Judith Lucy. It's not her name. Back in the 1920s, was wrong in when she was protesting against the massacre of Indigenous Australians by driving them off a cliff, women, children, the whole bit, and slaughtering them all. When she protested against that, but called her poem "Negros Leap," in her mind, grim sarcasm, like they did it deliberately. That's what poets do, They're not necessarily saying what they're saying, and that's the whole idea of poems. Everybody's into poetry. Black Lives Matter doesn't mean Black Lives Matter. It means Black Lives should matter. It means they don't matter enough, or we wouldn't even be talking about it and all that sort of stuff. Me too. It doesn't exactly mean me too. That everyone's saying me too. It means, you can't. Oh, it doesn't matter. Anyway, and all that sort of stuff. There's another one too in my newsfeed recently. Don't worry, men. Oh, recently. There's a whole push on at the moment, and a good push, because it's to do with the Me Too movement, but it's the next step on. Women are coming out and making allegations, as they should. Brittany Higgins was assaulted. I might use the R word. It's a little bit. Now look at it. Now you might say, just say it, rape. And I say, oh, all right, okay. There's nuance, but then again, there might be algorithms in these, YouTube, evil empire Illuminati YouTube. They might be looking for, they might ban this episode by misunderstanding it because I use words in conjunction with other words, and they might say you're promoting these things. No, I'm not, but there you go. But the R word. Oh yes. So that's a big deal at the moment. And what was the headline I was looking at? Yes. And some men have come back against that. Now, 95% of the time, when a woman makes an allegation, it's true. Maybe 98% of the time, maybe 99.5% of the time, when an allegation is made, it's true. But what's happened, as you do, because people are very bad at arguing, you get one side saying men are part of the problem. Men are the problem, And then you hear these stupid men saying, "Oh, not me." Yeah, all right, we're not talking about you. That's Life of Brian again. You're all individuals," said Brian to the crowd. He's like Jesus, Brian. You're all individuals, and one person said, "Oh, I'm not." And by saying that, he was individual. Anyway, so the headline, I've got to remember what it was. Yes. So what you get is there's a move on at the moment, a sort of push to sort out this business of how much rape happens to women, and all that sort of thing. It's not okay, and all that sort of thing. And